recording.
Nice, it's official.
It's official.
Okay, so do we want to do the transits first, or do you want to do the tarot first? How do we want to do it?
Let's start with the transits.
Okay, let me pull this up because it's fucking gonna be crazy. Oh, or I guess we're gonna be cursing on this. Is that allowed?
Oh, are you kidding? Have you met me?
It's gotta be. It's just like all of my astrology videos. It's like every other word is like fuck or shit. It's kind of bad, honestly. It's like pirate astrology.
At least it's not just me. Oh my gosh. I feel so bad. Like I've been trying to curb it because YouTube is quick to put the smack down if you say fuck too many times, but it's my favorite F word. Like that's rude.
I mean, it's just like how I speak. So if we're just gonna be censoring people based on that, I mean, I guess I'm out of the game.
Right.
Okay, my computer almost exploded, but it's working. I'm so sorry.
All good. Exploding computers are never good.
Yeah, crisis averted, but I think we are actually good now. So we'll pretend like that past 5 minutes didn't happen.
It's all right. I can cut it out.
Can you see my Astro Gold?
Yes.
Okay. So I will do just a quick. I think what needs to be talked about here is the next month, right? So if we want to condense this time period that's about to go down to a month, what we're going to see here is, right, this Saturn Uranus square is very, very, very tight right now. Like this is the vice grip of the last, like this is the last time it's going to pass through. Over the past year and a half, we've been dealing with this, right? It's this tension between like, okay, there's this structure that's on the verge of collapsing. There's this thing that we've been dealing with since early 2020 when we had that Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars conjunction in Capricorn, right? Capricorn and Aquarius, both Saturn rule signs. There are these structures that are just like being torn apart, and we're being, with the Saturn retrograde, thrown back in on ourselves to create a new structure and a new foundation. Squaring the Uranus retrograde, there is this kind of like spiritual force that's coming from within, but it's also this higher divine force that's energizing us toward an understanding of who we are as grounded, embodied, living beings, that is flying in the face of this organized, structured reality of the past that has really formed and founded our entire lives. So like, what are we going to do at this impossible? The third quarter square is the crisis of consciousness square in Dane Rudyard's vocabulary. So it's like, how are we gonna handle this, right? How are we gonna move into the new, right? This phase is gonna close, and Saturn's gonna come conjunct to Uranus in a couple of years here. This phase is gonna close, and we're gonna start a new phase. It's like a new moon of Saturn Uranus. So that's what we're sorting out right now, and it is at its thickest. So I'm gonna move this forward a month, and what we're gonna see is really this. I would say this is probably the transit of the year in my mind, not to like blow it insanely out of proportion. It's this transit, and we were talking about the transit on August 1st, right, with the Mars Uranus North Node conjunction. This one is Moon Uranus North Node conjunction.
Oh,
opposite. Wow. Yeah, this is crazy because it's on the
intense.
Midterm election day for the United States too, right? So that's something to keep in mind. I have this on the DC, right? This is DC. I was born Georgetown University Hospital, right? So it's the DC chart, but you can see all of this stuff is right on the ascendant of Washington DC. This is total eclipse energy, total lunar eclipse. This is the next big transit, right? This is what we're gearing up to for this whole month. So here you can see the Saturn-Uranus square is still active. Mars is now retrograde in Gemini, square Neptune, right? Like this is we were just talking about the Mars and Gemini, Neptune. This is like the trickster walking into the ocean. The ocean's gonna win. Like it's just gonna like swallow the trickster whole. Like the game is over. This is game over energy to me, reading this. So this is what we're going to be feeling all this next week, this build up to this total lunar eclipse. And there's a solar one 2 weeks before, right? But it's nowhere near as extreme as this. I'll throw it up really quickly. You see right here. Here's the solar 2 weeks before, October 25th. Sun Venus conjunction. Venus in Scorpio is a bitch. That's what I have. It's just like the most like vindictive, petty, jealous, manipulative. It's like I will do anything to get what I want. And like if you have that in the underworld of a solar eclipse, even partial, it's like it can be really dark. This can be really, really dark, manipulative, like cruel, cunning energy. And on top of the US Pluto return, which we were talking about, is like having this energy in Scorpio. We haven't had a lot of Scorpio activations of the South Node for the past year, right? Really, other than the eclipses earlier this year, the Taurus eclipses. So this is really when we're going to see this stuff coming up. And I'm honestly like very excited for it because I love the drama and the chaos, but that's also my like 6 planets in Scorpio, you know? I'm just like, all right, I'm ready for all of this shit to go down because I'm going to be filming it. That's my vibe right now. So like, this is gonna be. What is that?
Band-Aid it. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Get it over already.
Yeah, this is what it's gonna be. I mean, I think this transit is gonna be like if this isn't the ripping off of the Band-Aid, it's like we're realizing there's like a huge gushing wound under the Band-Aid, and like for some reason we forgot it even happened, and like the Band-Aid was put on in some sort of like coma state. And we're like, oh my God, I'm like bleeding from the inside. Like I need a doctor, like someone like help. Like this is crazy. This
so
is
Mercury is combust in this, right? Am I looking at that right?
Yes. So okay. This is yes, Mercury is going to be obviously right direct ever since we went through this whole fucking Mercury retrograde fuckery over the past couple of weeks. And now it's great. It has been fuckery going into this eclipse where you're right. Yeah, it's conjunct the sun, and right in the next couple of days, it's just going to pass right over. So again, right, this is going to be, I mean, I think like Mercury conjunct sun is kind of Mercury retrograde on steroids, right? Like it's just like, like there's this blinding power and this blinding force. Like, what am I saying? What am I speaking? I mean, and right, the opposition to the moon and Uranus is like these emotions are coming out of nowhere and they're slapping us in the face. This is kind of hurricaney.
It is like I'm looking at this and thinking with Mercury being where it is, like number one election in the US, we're not going to find out who wins right away just because of that. There's probably going to be miscommunications about either projections on who's going to win or who actually win. Like that's kind of making me think of like the Bush Gore bullshit a long time ago.
I would be surprised if people even found the polls. Like I don't think anyone's going to know where the fuck they are, what they're doing. And so like we were just talking about the opposition square to Saturn, like this tension of the foundations coming apart at the seams, the emotional volatility combined with what you're saying, right? This idea of like we're not going to know, or like we're not going to know yet. Conjunct the Venus is like everything is kind of up in the air, and the underpinning of it is the Saturn square Uranus on top of Saturn square the fucking eclipse, right. On top of Saturn square the nodes is like, I think the more urgent problem here is going to be like the spiritual crisis, like rearing its ugly like Hydra head, as opposed to even like the results of the election, right? Like obviously that's going to be a turning point in terms of the next 2 years in this country, right, leading up to the presidential. But like, man, I think that this spiritual crisis is a huge underpinning of this, and it's exacerbated by the U.S. Pluto return and that Mars square Neptune, and obviously Mars square Jupiter here as it's ingress back into Pisces to really form that Jupiter Neptune connection again.
Oh, Jupiter and Neptune, you know. Okay, so total newbie. I think I can still call myself a newbie, even after
I know a pretty good amount, I think, you know. But go ahead.
So of course Jupiter is gonna amplify anything that it touches, right? And I want to say that wasn't there some Jupiter Neptune action right before that thing that shall not be named hit the first time back in 2020? Different house, but it was like a similar.
That thing that shall not be named. I feel like we're like the Harry Potter universe now.
Well, I figure if I don't say the big bad word, they can't like, suppress the video.
Getting our video
really unique.
I think yeah, we may have said fuck too many times already. Who knows? It's good information though. Whoever gets a chance to watch it, I think there's gonna be
Right?
some good stuff. So what you're saying, the Jupiter Neptune stuff?
I thought there was some type of something going on between Jupiter and Neptune at that time.
Okay. Sextile? Yeah.
Well, that's something. But usually like a sextile is usually a not necessarily a beneficial aspect, but it's not as tension rocked as like a square or an opposition.
Yeah, this to me is like communication, right? So if you were think of it as like, okay, Pisces is next door neighbors with like Aquarius or something. Aquarius is not gonna be like really good friends with Pisces, right? Like they're gonna be like, okay, damn, like Pisces is playing that like angsty like Nirvana shit again, and it's like really loud and like really emo. Like I'm so tired of hearing this, right? Like I'm trying to focus on like whatever kind of like highfalutin shit that Aquarius is focusing on, some sort of like transcendental meditation, right? And then
Yeah.
like over here, Capricorn's like, damn, like that music is like really expressing like the spirit of the time. It's like we're getting this, right? Like this is the foundation of like the our like our society that we live in right now. Kind of like with that, like they can communicate because they're right not like right next door to each other, and like Pisces isn't like just making all that fucking noise and annoying Aquarius, right? But there's some distance between Capricorn and Pisces to the point of which we have we haven't like an ability to communicate because there's something that's linking them beyond just being next door neighbors. Like you might not like your neighbor as much as someone who lives down the street who, let me think of a good connection between Pisces and Aquarius, who like understands the importance of like the structural reality or like foundations of consciousness in terms of like some sort of connecting force. Aquarius wants to transcend all of the human stuff and get to the alien outer reaches of transcendental consciousness, but like Capricorn and Pisces are like there's something really human about sharing consciousness, and it builds the foundation of our like earthly world, if
Mhm.
that makes sense, right? So that
Yeah,
would
that
be
makes sense.
the kind of connection here. There's like this understanding of the philosophical foundations of our earthly world, like the things that form our social connections, as being very important, and that is directly connected to this kind of fundamental human consciousness that we all share. um that to me would be what this sextile in particular represents. But then obviously, right, you're talking about this happened during the time period of 2020 where there's this huge, like massive, like this is like the I don't know if you watch those like videos where the building structures like they get blown up from the foundation.
Oh yeah, yeah. The
Yeah,
demolition videos.
yeah, they dynamite the foundations. Like that's what's happening here. So like I mean, that's the overwhelming energy and force in Capricorn, but there is still this sextile here, right? With Neptune that's saying, okay, there is something that's underlying all of this that's important and that deserves to be preserved, which is
Mhm.
like the inherent humanity or like the foundational consciousness that connects us all. Neptune and Pisces is the epitome of like the ocean of consciousness. Um Obviously like the the domicile of Neptune.
Mhm.
So you're right. That's an interesting connection, and I think it's an important one because if we want to keep going on the Neptune thread, um, let's go here. We can go to the Neptune Jupiter conjunction in Pisces earlier. That's
Okay.
earlier this year. That's crazy. That feels like last year, honestly.
It does. It does. This year's been kind of weird. Like if the timeline, it feels in some aspects as it's speeding up or going backwards, depending on I feel like where you are in a
Mhm.
spiritual sense. And it's been interesting to observe this in other people. Sometimes albeit a little sad, but yeah, the timeline is it feels weird. It definitely feels weird.
I think it's the Uranus North Node thing. Like it's
Mhm.
pressing the gas down on people who are already in the car, and then people who aren't in the car are like being dragged, like holding onto the car door. It's like
Yeah.
either way it's uncomfortable, but like you'd probably much rather be in the car than like hanging on the car door. Like that's not a good place to be.
No. Not
But yeah,
going
you're
120 miles per hour.
No, that's how fast we're going too. It's not like we're like it's not like we're ghost riding a whip. Like it's not this. Like this is like on the Autobahn. It's not.
Right.
It's not. Yeah. Okay, but I mean that's really what I have, right? Do you wanna jump into some tarot and then we can go back to the eclipse?
Yeah. So let's see what comes out. So I am using the Urban Tarot.
Okay,
And I don't have a setup so people can see my hands yet.
that's
So
fine. Not
let's see
needed.
what comes out. This is a good card for the collective energy. It's probably one of my favorites for collective energy. Okay, so the cards that came out is the Eight of Swords, which in this deck stands for interference. And what's really interesting about the visual that they've included on this card is there's 8 swords going through a TV set. And you can see all the cords coming out, and it's standing on the like as the swords are like the TV stand, if that makes sense. It's quite provocative, considering what we've been talking about. So that kind of ties into what what you've been saying, and definitely where Uranus is popping in with this like unstable energy. It feels weird to call Uranus unstable because that's its job. Its job is to shake up the status quo. So yeah, this is one of those periods of times where you want to use discretion when it comes to anything media related, I would say. Don't be so quick to digest everything that you're hearing, because you're probably not getting everything that you're not getting all the information is what's likely. So bottom of the deck, which is also very interesting because of the number, it's the Eight of Pentacles. And that stands for prudence in this deck. So again, that's just backing up to have discretion with what you're listening to, who you're listening to, what you're taking in, so you don't get caught up in this the tentacles of the disinformation. So with double eights coming out, I'm thinking that potentially some of the disinformation we hear about may have to do with the financial sector. Now, I know that there's been talks about, are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? There's information that's being intentionally left out. So that's something to keep in mind. If you don't have to spend money right now on anything, I would say don't. Save your money if you can. That's a message that's been coming through a lot, even including on, the with Sky, watching Esoteric Sky's channel. So yeah, that's it for that. Yeah, this is pretty that's pretty poignant. It's not often that I'll pull cards and I get double or triple of the same number. So when I do, I pay attention to that.
Right. So I mean, just going off immediately off of that, that's exactly what this chart represents to me. Obviously, eighth house is Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
Scorpio is the only two things in life are death and taxes, right? It's
Right?
death and taxes, and like like in the case of Venus, just like very, very like possessive, jealous, and manipulative sex. Like that's like
Yes.
they're like this is the only thing that's guaranteed, right? And so what you're saying in terms of the financial sector, I mean, I'll approach it from that angle too, right? If we're talking about death and taxes, the information regarding death and taxes, like you could just say that this right here with a Uranus, Mercury conjunct the moon and the sun, it's like a double eclipse in the sense, right, that Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
Uranus bringing in the kind of transcendental spiritual information. It's like this is the energy of like an epiphany or an ecstasy where you receive information from a trance or an ecstatic state where Mercury would be like this is the worldly information, right? Like you're talking about information regarding finances or information regarding things that you would need to know practically to function in the world. This is a double eclipse energy because you have the higher and lower octaves as well as the sun and moon conjunct the nodes.
It's
So
almost like too, if you look at like the number eight, of course, flip it on its side, and it becomes a symbol of infinity. And the thing with infinity, of course, is that it the law of thermodynamics, right? Nothing energy cannot be stopped. Once it's in motion, it's always in motion. And how I see the number 8 as, when you get to that middle point before you're getting to the 2 outsides, you're looking at 0 point energy. So it is literally in the end and the beginning of something. Now, it's been in the news all over, this idea of cryptocurrency and how that crashed and how that entire market was manipulated. And it's interesting that, as that is, I feel like there was a deeper lesson in there if people actually look to see it. And that's the fact that money markets can very easily be manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost wonder too if there's going to be even more information comes out on that, or maybe we'll even see a new cryptocurrency, or we'll get some country, maybe even the US, trying to move forward with their own version of a cryptocurrency. And that kind of ties back into what you're saying about Mercury and the sun being there. Like, we can't necessarily see that information because Mercury is combust. So they manipulated the markets so that basically that transference of wealth that should be taking place right now is not taking place, and in effect happened so that the powers that be, if you will, can remain in a position of power that they're in. Where I think this is not working for them specifically is the fact that the US is in its Pluto return, or at least within that span of energy.
Right. To go immediately off of that, right? Like, it'll be interesting to see Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, right? Because there is this overarching, like, it's impossible if you live in the world, you're seeing it right now, right? So for instance, Hurricane Ian, right, that just came through, you would think the humanitarian thing is that if we lived in an energetically equal society, is that if people needed energy, right, like money or resources, particularly in a time of catastrophe, that energy would be funneled to them by way of a communal effort, as opposed to possession and accumulation of resources, to the point of which you have people that are so incredibly wealthy, again, right, like the idea of a plutocracy, right, the ruling of the absolute wealthy elite. Pluto in Capricorn is the epitome of plutocracy energy, right? Having that at the end degrees and this Pluto return in America is just, again, right, going back to death and taxes. This, to me, this Scorpio Taurus axis and the activations here are like very Jeffrey Epstein energy. I mean, I don't know how much we're allowed to go there on like YouTube. Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, like this group of elite people who really don't even live on the same planet as right, the rest of us. It's like the 0.0001% of the wealthy elite, right? And that's where their power is, right? It's the hold that they have on these resources that people need, right? And it's not like a want, it's a need in order to survive. And when you say 0 point energy, I think immediately of Mars square Neptune, both of them retrograde, right? Like Jupiter, Mars, Neptune retrograde is like,
right.
Mars and Gemini is peak trickster energy, right? Like, this is like
Totally.
some sick joke or some sick game, right? Or we're it's like the person who says we're living in a simulation, right? But like Mars and Gemini is like actually that, like, we're living in a simulation and everyone's playing the game, and like, as long as you play the game, XYZ is going to happen. It's like, pull the switch and this is what you're going to get. And having that square to Neptune, to me, suggests we really don't even know what game we're playing, and we don't really know why we're doing what we're doing. Again, right, that Mercury sun, and not knowing that, again, you were saying with the tarot pool, like, be very careful, right, with the spending that you're doing, or the actions that you're taking. And that's definitely what I would advise with this eclipse energy. It's like, why are you doing what you're doing? It's like, why is this routine so accepted by you? Or like, why have you been engaging in these behaviors? Are you playing into some sort of like plutocratic master game, or are you playing into like, this is my sole purpose and this is where I'm going and this is why?
Exactly. It almost feels like those who don't pay close enough attention to that, like the things that they're consuming, with, of course, Taurus being in the 6th house, you could be looking at like medical issues. Again, not a doctor, don't play one on TV, but you could be looking at medical issues that end up monopolizing the money that you have. And if you spend that money, you won't have the money to put towards that. And, or this could be that it almost reminds me of like coins falling through fingers, because by not paying attention in something that you do now, you're basically going to be losing money later. So we could also be talking about any major investments at this time, with a lot of this being hidden in the 12th house. You know, things aren't clear. I'll put it that
Yeah,
way.
it would have to be right, like just bearing in mind that this is the Washington D.C. chart. So like obviously this is like if we're talking about the midterm elections, this is the chart to look at for sure. But like
Mhm.
it that definitely will depend house placements depending on where we're looking at the chart. But if we're looking at 6 and 12, right? The the occult or the entire ocean of the manifest and unmanifest. And then right, as you're saying, right, the very literal, the material, the body, the chop wood, carry water house, the
Yeah.
Pisces axis. It's like that that axis having Taurus and Scorpio on the Pisces Virgo axis is about as like meeting of spirit and matter as it possibly gets. And you as it is definitely a difficult time with the Saturn square. Like this Saturn Uranus thing, and I mean you almost don't even see Saturn square Uranus here because of how just how so much traffic is on the fixed axis
Oh, totally. But
in
I
this
think that's how
chart.
Saturn wants it. It's working in the background with all of this. You know how I feel Saturn is, likes to make everybody his bitch. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
pay
it's this
attention to Saturn.
this Saturn is my daddy, right? Like
Right?
Saturn is the axis here. There's no mistaking that, right? And like Saturn is ultimately deciding what comes and what goes here.
Mm-hmm.
If Taurus is the earth and Scorpio is like the realm of spirit, um Saturn is the axis point here. It's like this is what is staying and this is what is going. And like with a full moon eclipse, you're going to see pretty clearly what's staying and what's going. And the harder you try to hold on to what's going, it's going to be like very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saturn will make sure it's uncomfortable for you as well. And I think in that case too, if you continue to pursue things that are clearly representations of you swimming upstream like a salmon during spawning season instead of going with the flow, that there'll
So
be a lot of disruptions that you won't see coming as well. And that's just Uranus working its magic.
right. And so that's what we're going to see here. If I was going to make any prediction, which I'm usually kind of hesitant to do, but it's just blatantly obvious. It's in the charts. Um, you're going to see, right, the plutocracy desperately trying to hang on to what vestiges remain of its power. But right, obviously, as you see throughout history, that revolutions tend to come with Uranian energy, particularly Uranus aspects to the outer planets, right? The
Mm-hmm.
planets of the gods, right? The things that are usually slow to change, but Uranus is really just gonna bang that around and make it happen. There's no way that this structure and this system of the plutocracy remains, and Pluto's transit out of Capricorn is going to assure that, right? And no one can necessarily say what's going to happen in the Aquarian side of Pluto, right? Like it may be like a technocracy moving on from the plutocracy,
Yeah.
right? It could be like the evolution of it, but once we hit Pisces and once we get into Aries, it's going to be gone by necessity. There's
Yeah.
just no it's whatever kind of vestiges remain in Aquarius, like whatever kind of Elon Musk fuckery is going to like go down during that Pluto and Aquarius, and there will be some Elon Musk fuckery, make no
Oh,
mistake.
totally.
Pluto and Aquarius, it's gonna be fucking Jeff Bezos making like a school bus rocket ship and doing some like Miss Frizzle shit while the world's burning. Well, Miss Frizzle's way cooler than Jeff Bezos, but the point is the image is still there. Right, like that, this is really kind of the linchpin, right? Like we got to observe the Pluto transit here is like this is what's really happening even behind the scenes of the Saturn Uranus square. Right, Pluto's gonna actually ingress into Aquarius, right, in the beginning of next year, but then come back one last time to fuck with us a little bit more. And then we will be off into the Aquarian. And when we do, Saturn will also be in Pisces. Let's see.
Okay.
I'll just show it for a quick second. Where is it? There's so much traffic here you can't even see. Yeah, see, Pluto
Right.
0.
It is very busy in that area of the sky.
Yeah, 2024. We can get into that like way later, obviously, but right, like that Pluto ingress back into Aquarius, there's gonna be a ton of traffic, and
Oh, that's
obviously,
an anaretic degree too on Pluto.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's when Pluto gets into Aquarius, 0 degrees. finally,
Oh,
like, at
see that.
last. And right, I guess we'll have the moon conjunct it pretty much right away, but that's a whole fucking mess. Let's get back to here where we were. Yeah, this is the next big thing for sure. So, I mean, energetically, that's what we're doing this October 5th. That's what we're building up to for the next month. Um, what else do we have? I guess we have the Aries full moon that's coming up, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Jupiter will be at anaretic degree in Aries as well. So I'm
Yeah,
looking at well, something I'm kind of interested in is in degree theory. Like I said, I'm a newbie astrologer. I'm a baby astrologer. Don't come for me, all. But I'm noticing just Pluto as you're going through this and some of the I guess critical degrees it's hitting. So with it right now, or no, on the 18th, it's in a cardinal degree.
yeah.
Let's see.
Yes, this is a world point. Zero Aries, obviously. I mean, like if there was any such thing as a world point, 0 degrees Aries would be it for sure. I mean, this is like this is the birth moment. And I mean, anything that we had right over the past couple of months with Jupiter and Aries is like our sneak preview energy, right? Like we're getting a glimpse of that, but it's like none of that's actually here, right? And so it's kind of like this tantalizing, or like there's something else, but like there's this new start and this new journey that we're undertaking, but we're not even undertaking it yet. We're just kind of seeing like the trailer for it. But yeah, right. I guess it happens pretty fast, right? It's coming through the red series pretty fast over the next 2 weeks, hitting that 0 degrees, and then right by the time of the Scorpio partial solar eclipse, it is finally moving back. First quarter moon after the partial solar, moving back into Pisces.
Which it's hitting that again, hitting another anaretic degree. I think it's going to be interesting what Jupiterian themes come up because of the fact that it's hitting those anaretic degrees with all the rest of this going on. I know there'll be expansion. I'm just not sure what and what.
Right. Well, one of the things that I think is important about Jupiter, like there are definitely the themes of expansion and making big, but there's also the theme of like philosophy and interpretation, right? And that's really, I think, what I carry into a Jupiter reading is that we have this interpretation of the reality, right? Which you could say is Uranus is what springboards us in to the realization of Neptune, or the oneness of consciousness. Uranus is that transcendental information that comes down into the Saturnian realm, right? Like if you think of a sage meditating, right? The very limits and borders of our consciousness are Saturn, right? Saturn is the furthest planet out that we can see with the naked eye. But Uranus is coming in and bringing in transcendental information, right? Information from the beyond into the realm of the Saturnian. And we use Jupiter as the magnifying glass, or as the philosophy, to try to interpret that transcendental information and expand the borders of our waking consciousness, right? Or the borders of the realm of what we conceive of as reality. And that's what the nexus of the Saturn Uranus square is that we're having this experience of something transcendental that's beyond the reaches of what we currently consider to be true, right? And it's obviously true, right? We can feel that it's true. We're experiencing it as true as a collective, but we're having trouble integrating it. We're having trouble integrating it and bringing it down into the realm of the Saturnian, right? Into the realm of our consciously realized reality. And what I think the Jupiter role here is, especially with the Neptune conjunction in Pisces, this is the domicile of Neptune, but Jupiter's also exalted in Pisces, right? Ancient ruler. But this, to me, suggests, right, that the last time this was a transit was Charles Baudelaire. I think it was 1855. This was the conjunction, Neptune, Jupiter, and Pisces. Charles Baudelaire was writing Flowers of Evil. It's like it's this synthesis and merger of what we consider to be good and bad and right and wrong, and this inability to really distinguish the moral bounds and philosophical bounds of our understanding anymore.
Oh,
Right. And
that's
that
so interesting. It's
that's
what I
hand.
keep hearing is like the rise of the guru or rise of the fake guru, if that makes
Oh
sense.
yeah, that's awesome. That's totally it. That's awesome.
Wow. And like
I
I
mean,
can see kind of with Chiron being here, because I know that we're getting some of that lesson in Chiron with I believe with the full moon coming up here at the end of the week, that it makes me think that it's going to play on some of those aspects of Aries, this the false guru, if you will, to try to convert people or manipulate people. So Aries, of course, being war. I mean, technically Mars is the representation of that, but Aries would be the, how would you say that? The practical implementation of that through a sign, like that energy, if it
yeah,
were
yeah,
to be forth.
yeah. Mars is Aries practically, right? Like,
So like a warmongering guru.
Aries rules Mars in the daytime, and Scorpio rules Mars in the nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, just in the practical, the consciousness, right? Like in the consciousness of day, right? It's, I would say, like, Putin is a great figure to think of in this kind of transit, right? There's a lot of big activations to Putin's chart right now that we could look at, but I honestly don't give a fuck about him. So, I mean, but if you just, yeah, the guru culture is fascinating to me, right? Because what is a better definition of a modern guru than like these reality TV show dictators that we have, right? Like that to me is the epitome of it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to look at it in a spiritual religious context. Like look at these people who are fanatical devotees of these cults of personality, right?
Yeah.
Like the Chiron in Aries, right, is like, where is our sovereignty? Like where is our spiritual power and life force, right? Like Chiron tutored all of the great heroes, right? Like Hercules and Jason, taught all of them, right, what they needed to know in order to go on these heroic journeys of, we were talking earlier about the hero's journey,
Yeah.
right? Like where is that? Where is that in our culture? I mean, it's something that I don't see. I don't see this being undertaken. There's no, we can't have gurus. We are our own gurus, right? Like we have to undergo these journeys ourselves. The fanatical devotion to me suggests the Chiron wound.
Yeah.
Right, you don't, the spotlight on that is ugly because it shows us that we have no self-sovereignty.
Right. The herd culture almost. And that's another thing that Aries can be representative of is the self. I mean, it is I am.
Yeah,
That makes
yeah,
complete sense to me.
yeah. And I mean, if you want to take it to this the spiritual guru point, right, like that, the I am is what is said in the Advaita Vedanta tradition that symbolizes the ultimate knowledge, right? It's
Mhm.
the full quotation is I am Brahman, right? Or I am that. I am the universal source and center of consciousness.
Yes.
I am Neptune, right? I am the eternal. I am the one self. That's the realization, right? That if we have that self-realization, and that's personal empowerment, because we're not putting our our faith and our trust and our belief in anything. We're living our own lives from a place of personal sovereignty because there's nothing else, right? Like if I looked outside of myself and I said, I'm going to put my belief and faith in this person or this romantic relationship or whatever, the moment I do that, I'm disempowering myself. I'm throwing myself out of my sovereignty into this relationship of dependence.
Mhm.
It's incredibly, incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. That's how cults are born.
Yeah, I think that's what we're living in. Just a massive cult, right? There's no hiding that when it comes down to this this eclipse energy.
Mm-hmm.
That I really like that you brought up the Chiron activation and the full moon, because I think that's important. It's part of the story that's playing out. If we wanna understand the story, we definitely have to look at the major lunations. And there's three, right? It's that full moon conjunct Chiron. It's the new moon partial solar eclipse
Mm-hmm.
and the full moon. And I think that's the story of our next month.
Yeah. It is going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. I think I'm particularly interested with all these transits of seeing like where the what's actually hidden, because right now it's hidden from everybody, right? So it's
Yeah.
going to be interesting to see like what sector of the collective that information is being revealed from. So I'll be keeping an eye out for that and doom scrolling and everything.
Please don't. Please don't put yourself through that. But I mean, you know, I don't think you'll need to doom scroll. I think it's going to be like people are going to be getting notifications. I mean, I'm not trying to fear monger or anything, right? But I think it's going to definitely be front page news. We've definitely had a lot of front page news lately, right? I mean, obviously, probably every day, but I
Yeah.
mean, this is going to be something that I don't think anyone's really going to be able to ignore. But I also think at the more kind of like occult and spiritual level, it's going to be right. Like you're going to see the world event, but I think you might even people might even not even see the world event because of the personal chaos that this is going to be causing.
Mm,
I know a lot of people right now, right, that are going through inner spiritual turmoil to such an extent that they can't even see other people,
yeah.
right? And I think you were talking about the collective dark night that's going on, and I think
Yeah.
that's been going on at least since 2019 into 2020, and
Oh, 100%. I agree with that. Like
yeah,
it it's been interesting, like having gone through the process myself of the Dark Knight, and because of how long that it took,
yeah,
like not saying I'm, by no means am I like the authority on this process, but I definitely got a look at the multiple sides that can happen when someone's going through this, process of birth, because effectively that's what it is. Birth, however way you look at it, is traumatic. At the end of the day, it is traumatic. And sometimes when people are in that space, especially mentally, it's difficult to see anybody else because half the time they can't even see themselves.
right. And I think that's exactly what we're going through right now, and I think if you are in that position, right, as someone who I under having undergone that experience already, right, I think is ideal, right, because you can kind of in one way or another empathize with the collective because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're all going through this. Even if you've gone through it, you're probably going through it again to maybe some sort of microcosmic degree, right, where you're seeing these themes be rehashed, but you don't
Hmm.
have to be so immersed in the direct experience. Right, like I think if this is something, I know a lot of people that are going through this for the first time, and it's obliterating, right, because your
It
sense of
is.
is gone, it's lost. Your sense of former identity is gone and lost, and
It's like the tower card. You were literally knocked down to the fucking studs.
yeah,
Literally knocked down to the studs. And the more you resist it, the more it tears up
it's
whatever's left. You know what I mean? Sometimes if the foundation that you have tried to put into place is actually solid, then that might be, I guess, preserved in some aspect. But resistance in this, in this form, going through this process literally makes it more painful, much more
right.
painful, and it extends it on top of that.
Right. The process is just to distill it, right? Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Pluto, conjunct Capricorn, March of, I guess, February and March of 2020 into ready immediately into Saturn, Uranus square and the United States Pluto return. It's seamless. The astrology is seamless and it really does tell the story. Those are the major right outer planetary aspects. And I think if we want to, like, we've talked about a lot of dark shit, but that's the Scorpio, both of us talking, I think, right? But like, if we want to look at the window of the light that's coming through here, is that we have Saturn and Uranus separating big. Like, this is a huge separation considering all the fucking shit from the past year and a half. This is
Yeah.
already going into a 3-degree separation in a couple of weeks, right? Like, this is fast.
So
Once
yeah,
Saturn,
there's a transcendence that is approaching, at least for some who have managed to do the work needed over this last 2 years, year and a half.
yeah, once Saturn goes direct here, this is going to be pretty fast, I think, right? Because you have Saturn going direct, we're already going into a 5-degree orb, and this is what you want to be tracking if anyone is tracking this, right? And I'm sure a lot of people are already doing so, right? Like the further and further separation we get of Saturn and Uranus, the more and more the resolution of this conflict is going to be grounded in consciousness, right? Like we're going to
Mhm.
start to have some practical grounding of this Uranian knowledge. But you can see here, right? This is still conjunct. Like this is crazy to me
Yeah.
how, right, the transit of the nodes here is like the time is so, it's like there's this quote in Hamlet where it's like the time is out of joint. Like this is totally what that signifies to me. This is like there's this like quantum evolution that's happening. Saturn, like Uranus is somehow still conjunct the north node into next year. That to me is astonishing. Right, but again, that's we have this retrograde motion of Uranus that's moving with the retrograde motion of the north node, even while Saturn is going direct. So it's like we're grounding this information. This information is becoming really grounded, and we're getting this sense of what this transit of Saturn through Aquarius is and has been and needs to be in order for us to move into Pisces. But we're still going to have this conjunction until really the spring of next year, when there's going to be firm separation. But this is going to be a totally new paradigm, right? Because we're going to have Jupiter back into Aries. It's not going back into Pisces ever again. I mean, not until the next 13 years. So, no, I guess I shouldn't say ever again, right? And then as soon as it's really, really reaching those mid degrees, Saturn into Pisces. So this into the spring of next year, it's really this period between the eclipse in November. That's going to be really, if you want to say the Uranus Mars North Node was the first bang,
it was the first thing that hit the domino. So like if you if you think that like those domino videos, you know, where people build like intricate designs and then just knock them down because it's really cool and looks fun. But it's not, I look at it as something like that. Yeah. So there's the marble that's coming down, whatever little contraption, and at that point with this particular transit, the ball hits the dominoes and it begins.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's August 1st, November 8th. And then I think November 8th is really I don't want to say it kind of is, right? It's the last bang of 2022. And then that's gonna be what carries us into this. And I would call this a new paradigm. Like there's just no, because you see we have Saturn, Pisces, 0 degrees. Jupiter's into Aries, it's gone, not coming back. And then a couple weeks later, into more of the later days of spring, Pluto into Aquarius.
Interesting. It is kind of a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes this is just gonna be a brand new thing, right? Like whatever realization comes about from that November 8th eclipse, and it's gonna be big, and I'm sure people are already feeling it, and you're already getting a sense that like it's that pre-eclipse tension where the birds are flying and the animals are running, and
like the volcano's about to explode in Yellowstone, but all the animals know it first, so they dip out. So in this case, or in this analogy, if you will, the animals are all those who are really sensitive, those who pay attention to the transit. So, your astrologers, your psychics, your mystics.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's going to be this period, November to March.
Wow. Very interesting. I don't know how busy that 9th house is.
Yeah. Again, if we're doing Washington, D.C., yeah, this is my rising chart. So I have Aries 9th house, Leo first. So that will be interesting with the Aries placements. A lot of new beginning stuff. But that Chiron through Aries thing is going to be there for a long time. It's going to be a couple years. So that suggests to me that there's still going to be that wound of sovereignty, and I think that's really going to be one of the last things in this cycle that's going to get healed here, and it's probably going to take people a lot longer than they'd like. The wound of self-knowledge and acting from the power of self-knowledge is it's not necessarily a 30-day money back guarantee type deal.
Right. I'm curious, when does Neptune ingress into or back into Pisces or Aries? Am I looking at that right?
I probably shouldn't even go by month. It's just not going to do it. It's not going to do it. That's the hard thing about all this. It's like, yeah, it's all a matter of time, right? But
yeah,
time is very relative for us human beings. Oh gosh.
So I was just curious if Chiron makes any more, I guess, important connections to anything else once it's out of Pisces. As I've heard, like one of the astrology teachers that I have, Nadia Shah, she said that she kind of thinks that this whole idea of like the age of Pisces, quote unquote, as we're calling it, is once Neptune's out, it's done. Like that no longer exists, right?
Interesting.
So I'm wondering, as you're talking about this idea of this sovereignty and self-will, what that looks like, what that chart would look like once it's out of there. So let me see here. Oh,
Yeah, I also think that's not necessarily something sovereignty or self-sovereignty is not necessarily something that's dictated by the stars, but
oh, totally. No,
you could have
definitely not at all.
transits. You could have transits that would be more,
Being influential in how
yeah,
people go
conducive,
about it.
would be more conducive. Having Neptune in Pisces is just difficult from the sense of individuation, right? Like if you want to think of the process of individuation, right? It's like you have the primordial sludge or the primordial ooze or the ocean of consciousness, but something has to come out of it, right?
Right.
Like there has to be an individual. And we were talking a lot about individual consciousness. If we don't have an individual consciousness, there's no self-sovereignty. We're acting from even beneath like the herd mentality. It's like we're acting from the collective subconscious. Like we're not conscious of anything that we're doing and nobody else is. It's like we're acting from this wounded. We were talking about the root chakra, right? Our wounded root chakra, where we have no ground. Our
Mm-hmm.
foundation of our sexual life force energy is corrupted or enslaved or dependent upon something else. We're not in a position where we can be sovereign in our own life force energy and consciously choose where and how we want to express it. Um, so a movement, obviously having Neptune out of Pisces is a great thing to get out of that. I've heard some people talk about this as a moving into a war paradigm though with Neptune and Aries. I honestly have no idea what that looks like because I have no fucking like when was the last time Neptune wasn't in Aries?
Yeah, you got me on that.
Like 15 of my lifetimes ago or something. Like, man, I have no idea what that's gonna look like. But I would look at personally, I think this journey of Chiron through Aries really embodies that wound of self-sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would think the movement of Chiron out of Aries is going to signify. I think what we saw with Uranus in the North Node in Taurus this year was a lot of focus on grounding, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can I be grounded in this moment, even in the face of all of these structural and systemic changes to the world around me and to what I believe to be my life and my reality, right? I think that's really emblematic of what the Taurus energy does and is going to do. And I think that's really what happens here is that you're coming into this embodied sense of, okay, I've had this wound and it's been something that I haven't even been able to access. But now I'm in this place where I am in an embodied way interacting with this wound. And I think it moves here from a place of a wound of self-sovereignty into a wound of integrating the knowledge of the prior loss of self-sovereignty. This is really to me an indication of stepping into a power. It doesn't mean the wound is necessarily gone away, but it
Right.
means we're dealing with it in a practical, embodied way.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be a signature that I would look at. I mean, 2028, it's hard to even think about that far.
Right. Like a Neptune in Aries. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm, baby astrologer, but it makes me think like chemicals. So kind of like how the drug fentanyl is just suddenly everywhere.
Mhm.
One thing that I haven't really heard mention is that being used as a form of chemical warfare,
Oh,
because it
nice.
can be like people don't get addicted to something until you introduce them to it. And if you're trying to take out a society where that culture is glorified in a sense, are you kidding me? Like that's your in. If you were going to do that, that's your in. So maybe like an increase in that. I don't know that like chemical attacks of some sort would per se be considered with Neptune and Aries, but that's just what came to mind.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that something like fentanyl would even be necessary in like in anything ever. Like, why
Yeah.
would we even need a compound like that? But I mean, that's a whole other thing. I don't necessarily, it'd be hard for me to answer because I don't necessarily approach astrology from like that level of like archetypes, if that makes sense. I tend to approach it
Mhm.
from the more like abstract or esoteric archetypes. But yeah, again, we were talking, I said briefly that I think some people are referencing warfare here, and that
Yeah.
that would be chemical warfare. Like I would think of, if you were thinking of a Neptune and Aries archetype, it would be something like mustard gas being used in war,
Okay.
or something like that. That's what I would think of. But something that can be dissolute, that can be spread in many different places, like through the water supply or through the air, but in
Mhm.
such a way that it can be present in like in many places at once or completely cover an area. Like if you think about Neptune, Neptune is like that which fills up the container.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be interesting. That's a long ways away though, so we'll just have to see how it goes down. Hopefully it's not that, but you know.
Yeah. I mean, people will find 1,000 different ways to bring all this archetypal shit down to the most unevolved levels possible. So I hope it's none of that, but
Yeah.
we'll see how much integration can occur during this period of time to prevent stuff like that. And yeah, who knows how much people can turn away, right? I think we've seen over the past couple of years a lot of people turn away from this kind of work and do really everything they can to avoid it. And the repercussions are just like very,
Yeah.
very clear, what it causes.